Well, so we have to do the interaction as we review the newspapers. And Mama V is here. We'll be joined by Evans Mensah and then also Israel Lai. And Mama V, good morning to you.
Hi there. Good morning to you, Roland. How are you?
I'm good.
Great.
Good.
Great.
Well. And as and when we have Israel and Evans on stream, we'll let them into the review. But Mama V, you want to start? I hope that you had a great weekend. Let me ask you. You sound a bit laid back or lethargic this morning. I think you need some coffee.
Aha, that would do. That would do. It would change everything. Absolutely.
I think so.
Some dry one.
Yeah.
So let's start the newspapers. Hopefully you're doing good as well. And if you stayed up to listen to the president's address, or, well, if you made time to watch the news this morning, then you know that ban on gatherings not lifted. So keep doing the things that you've been doing. And if you haven't taken any of the protocols seriously, well, the numbers are still rising. And you have to begin to take them seriously so we can have our normal lives back. All right, let's do the newspapers. I'll start over the Finder, Roland. The Finder newspaper on the front page, plight of mothers in COVID-19, pragmatic interventions needed to further their cause. That's a call by the First Lady, Rebecca Ekufuado. Also, government did not share different macroeconomic data with IMF, according to the Finance Ministry. Don't lift ban on social and public gatherings. That's the Ghana Medical Association issuing a statement even before the president's address. Ghana's confirmed cases of COVID-19. Well, paper is late because it says 4,263. Obviously, the address was a bit late. Newspapers couldn't capture it. But, you know, we've gone up to 4,700. Okay, let's continue with the Ghanaian Times. Apologies, we're not able to show the newspapers on the screen this morning, but we're trying to work on that. So the Ghanaian Times newspaper says new Manche introduced to Traditional Council. Don't lift ban on social gathering, GMA to government. Let's fix problems on new TACRA report system. That's a call by the freight forwarders. On COVID-19, cases confirmed in Accra police cell. Zoom Lion disinfects, cleans police facilities. We will touch a bit on that and give you some details. But let's turn our attention to the back page of the paper. It has the details of that story on the disinfection of police installations reaching the central region. Also, Chihine gives to vulnerable in Achim Abuakwa. That's it for the Ghanaian Times. So we've done the Finder, the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Let's see. Let's follow that up with the Daily Dispatch. So on the front page of the Daily Dispatch, battle for MPs, Ablekuma not slot. Sheila Bartels likely to benefit from father's goodwill. So picture of father and daughter, Kwamina Bartels and daughter Sheila on the front page of the paper. Down memory lane, what Captain Retired Kojechi Kata submitted to the National Reconciliation Commission, the NRC. Boache Jako cautions MPP about the dangers of handpicking parliamentary candidates. And on COVID-19, recent increase of 921 cases, a factory in Tema with 1,300 workers had 533 confirmed positive. And that's the Daily Dispatch front page. The Daily Statesman now, Kabila to CPP members disregard unruly Akwete's call for CC meeting. Hard work will win us December polls. McMahon explains MPP's 3M's 2020 campaign. Well, he's been retained as the 2020 campaign manager for the party. Heritage and Stabilization Funds, not Mahama's idea. MPP exposes more NDC lies. And the last paper, before Roland runs us through what he has, is the Ghanaian Observer. And on the front page, Alote suspension saga. Mosquito upset with Mahama and Ampofo. Sounds like it's a question because it's got a question mark with it. Baumia others ready with NPP 2020 manifesto, according to NPP chief scribe. Group demands apology from Mahama. From John Mahama over false African press freedom ranking claim. And on One District, One Factory, Gegzim chases $100 million credit to fund more factories. Yeah, that's it for the Ghanaian Observer, Roland.
Yeah, definitely. Now let's start with For My batch of newspapers that I have. Or let's see, I have Daily Guide, so I'll start with the Daily Guide. It has on the front page, IMF bounces NDC, clears government over false data. And we know that this should be called for Newsfile, definitely. If you listen consistently or thoroughly to Newsfile over the weekend, you will get what the IMF position is, because the whole of last week was repleted with a lot of argument, because Fact Check Ghana put out a statement or its own opinion about what sort of data the Finance Ministry of our Republic gave the IMF and Parliament subsequently. And this also generated debates and a form part of the discussions, not only on Joy FM, but also right here on Joy News and the rest of the multimedia platforms, and indeed the entire media over the period of last week. So would want to do that. And it says COVID-19 attacks police cells is also on the front page of the Daily Guide. So we have it here. And then also 80 million Ghana city bail for coup doctor, 7 others. Now, this is quite an interesting story, and we all have been following this story in court. COVID-19 climbs high to 2,200. It should be 2,700, because at the time that it went to press, many of the dailies went to press, the address had not been released. 4,700 the number is not, but we have here on the front page of the Daily Guide 4,263. Robert stole 600,000 bullion van. This is a very bizarre story, but it happened I believe in the Bono area, and the story is on page 3 of the paper. And robbers on Friday evening attacked and robbed at gunpoint a bullion van carrying an unspecified amount of money from Techima to Sunyang. And it's why we have to invite into the review Evan Spencer, and then also Israel I. Good morning to you, the two of you.
Hello, good morning, Roland and Mama V.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Hey.
Yeah.
How you guys doing?
We're good. We're good. We hope that you slept well, woke up early as well. I'm not sure.
Oh, I mean, you could bet I haven't slept well. I mean, after watching the president and staying up that late, you say the Naldo pet and I don't come on. I mean, you get to stay up a bit longer. So yeah, I mean, Echo woke me up this morning, I must confess.
I know,
but
right?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to join you.
Yeah, true. And your voice sounds croaky, so it speaks to the related conversation you're talking about, not sleeping early. But for a newsman, it's normal, Israel. Not sleeping early, but waking up early.
Hi, Izzy.
Okay, so we'll stay with Evans. When Israel comes in, and then we'll also invite him onto the Zoom. And we've been looking at a number of the newspapers and the stories. And look, Mamavi, can you take Evans through the ones you looked on the front page?
I'm sure he's already familiar with what the newspapers are reporting. So Roland is just going to go through the rest of the papers, and then you gentlemen will have a pick. Let's see the issues on your heart this morning that you want to highlight on. So, Roland? Okay, so I do the Custodian. The Custodian has on the front page, Mahama to speak on £3 billion Airbus bribery scandal. And then the story talks on page 3 about the flag bearer of the NDC, former president, said to be rolling up his sleeves to face an apparent battle to extricate himself, as the weather the story used, from the £3 billion Airbus bribery and fine scandal that hit Ghana and other countries. An appointee of the former president, Mr. Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa, dropped the hint on a TV program over the weekend. But on page 2, the two of you out there, Israel as well as Evans, the GMA has issued a red alert on COVID-19. And we also do know what the content of that red alert is. Again, they were encouraging the president, if not appealing to the president, not to lift the restrictions. He did just that. I think significantly that will be it for me. But we all know the stories that are dominating the front pages. And so we'll have a pick, and we'll see how it goes.
Sure.
Hi, Izzy. Finally, we get to hear your voice. Good morning to you.
Yeah. Good morning to you guys.
Yeah, Israel.
Perhaps we can start with the president's address. I'm not sure everybody stayed up like we did to listen to him.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of what he said, highlights of that of the statement, guys.
Okay, so I did. Yeah, and what jumped out at me has to do with some inconsistencies regarding backlogs. And I don't know if that issue has come up yet, but the president was saying that the cases, the 921 that we had, which saw the case count jump to 4,012, had to do with a backlog. But we heard Professor Ampofo of Noguchi on Tuesday, just last Tuesday, saying that they had cleared the backlog. Noguchi had no backlog, and that the backlog that they had to do with cases here, which was 1,982, I believe. And so if you have 1,982 samples, I'm trying to, I find it hard to understand how come the president is talking about a backlog that goes back as far back as April.
Evans.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. But for me, of course, I mean, going into the president's address last night, the talk in town was a fear that the president was going to lift the restrictions. And we've seen GMA issue a statement. We've seen Occupy Ghana issue a statement, all of them warning the president against lifting the restriction. In the end, the president kept the restrictions. But something he also did, which had come in for some criticism before, was that instead of us seeing the real numbers reflect on the Ghana Health Service page, he gives us an update we didn't have before in terms of the numbers, which is 4,700 cases.
Yeah.
I mean, and the last time when Insian Sari was on my show, I was asking him, I mean, if you have these cases and you wanted to reflect on a daily basis, why don't you simply just update it on the website that we could all see in real time? Because when you see the numbers that the president gave, some of them go as back as Friday and Thursday into Saturday, and then there was a latest on Sunday. I mean, so we could have had this reflected in real time on the page. Then you could see, we could all track and follow in terms of how we are doing. Remember that this peak conversation is coming back, right? I mean, whether we've peaked, people say this is like a second and third peak. You know, it's become the butt of jokes on Twitter, because really, if we peaked on the 25th of April, they say, you look at the numbers and people begin to doubt whether we really peaked. I mean, so it really isn't helping the narrative at all.
Yeah, true. It's actually also reflected because most of the newspapers, almost all the newspapers missed it actually. They're quoting the previous number, which is also still on the Ghana Health Service website.
Yeah.
Yes,
and to top it up, I think that I'll go on the tangent that Israel has just started with. And I think that the president clearly, based on that announcement yesterday, is putting in our minds some level of uncertainty regarding the numbers. So we have 533 people who apparently tested positive in a factory in Tema. And we do know that if you look at the demographics of people who work in factories, because I lived in Ashaiman, I grew up in the Tema area, they usually live in the ghettos, the communities where we have a lot of clusters, etc. Now, how many days had they been infected going to work still before we did the discoveries? How many people have they infected? For example, many of them, if they run shifts, will buy food at night. Many of them will interact with their families, etc. Now, if somebody bought food at night, how do you go and trace the person that they bought the food from? Even more so, other patrons of that food seller. And I feel that if you look at the situation in Germany, where this morning we're told that they lifted the lockdown, but they are seeing a trickle in of the number of cases. In Korea, the city of Seoul, in Itaewon area, for example, one person went to a nightclub and infected 40 people just in a night. So we need to be told, well, we're testing more, and so we're getting more numbers. What about those that haven't been tested? How many more positives are we going to get?
So still lots of questions following the revelation of the 4,700. Properly so, Roland is worried about the possible people that this factory workers alone may have infected. Very relevant questions coming up today following that revelation.
Especially when the president actually said that the 533 people were infected by one person.
That's strange. That's strange. Any other pick that we can get? Because we have a lot of our children at home not going to school, and for me it's a concern for the parent. They are supposed to be paying school fees depending on which school they are going this week and the next week. So they are doing online studies. The internet is not consistent unless you have a broadband. Not all parents can afford.
Well, but even that, I mean, you're not home and the light goes off, which it does often.
Yeah.
So
it's a concern for many parents as well. So I'm hoping that we can come back to the table with some better solutions as to how.
No, I mean, and Roland, the president for the first time told us that he is working on the roadmap. I mean, he'll be announcing shortly, in his words, a roadmap to reopening the economy and lifting the restrictions. I mean, I'm really eager to see what this roadmap looks like. And you're right to mention the German example. I mean, yesterday we read a story about how Germany, since lifting the restriction, has seen a rise in their infections. And so, I mean, he's really caught between a rock and a hard place, because the restrictions, he said yesterday emphatically, that it cannot remain with us forever. It has to change at some point. The question is, do we have the science and the data that allows us to make that decision in a way that is backed by real science and data? Because if you look at the data that is shared with us, I have a challenge with it. I mean, I woke up this morning, I'm still seeing 4,200 on the page. The president has talked about 4,700 last night, and we are still struggling with, okay, if you don't do your daily cases, you can't plot your graph properly. I mean, it's still a challenge. I don't see what's the challenge between what the president says and how it reflects in terms of the data. That is a big question going forward. And Roland's concern could come to pass. Without the data, you can't make those hard decisions.
I'd like to go back to the case of the 533 workers in the factory in Tema. And Roland, the question you raised, which has to do with how many more people these people have infected, considering the fact that they may be coming from communities that are quite densely populated. And see, especially when we're looking at like a backlog. My issue, and one issue that people have been raising all this while, has to do with what happens to people whose samples have been taken. If your sample has been taken, ideally, you're supposed to self-quarantine, stay away from everybody else. But if you happen to have these people who are in communities who can't necessarily, they're in one room with the rest of their family. So maybe there are 4 of them in one room. And you say they should self-quarantine. How is that possible? And if they're not self-quarantining, then it means that they're most likely to be interacting with other people. They're going to pick their truck for public transport and get to work. And in their communities, they're using the same bathrooms with everybody else. And so that, for me, presents a real challenge. So we're talking about 533 people, but really, if you're going to do the contact tracing, it actually becomes a challenge. So what people have been pushing for a while now is, why don't we make it possible for people whose samples are taken and who can't self-quarantine, and tell these people, or find a place for these people? And the people are making reference to the schools. There are schools that, are closed at the moment. Can we send them to those schools and keep them there until they get their results, so that when they get their results, we can isolate them? Because until then, it means that people's samples are taking and they're mixing and interacting and mingling with everybody else, which is a problem.
All right, guys, stay with us. Let's see if we can do myjoyonline.com, find out what MyJoyOnline is reporting. You can have a say on some of the stories before we wrap up and make way for sports. So here we go with what MyJoyOnline is reporting this morning. Of course, we have the updates of the case counts rising to 4,700. Ban on public gatherings extended until May 31st. And if you missed the president's speech, you can play back. Just visit myjoyonline.com. Also, we are ready to contain the virus should ban on public gatherings be lifted. Now, this was Sam Korankye-Ankrah on Beyond the Lockdown with MFR POW last night. Also, political detractors making government effort to COVID-19 fight look bad for their survival, according to the president. Ken Takiteko Churu II outdoored as new Gamanche. UCC cautions lecturers against conducting exams, continuous assessment online. So this is what My Joy Line is reporting. Guys, are churches ready to contain the virus? Should the ban?
Well, I mean, that's a difficult one. I mean, so for me, my concern is it's not the big recognized churches like, Sam Korankye-Ankrah's church that I have a concern with. Once you say churches can come back to gathering, it is these small, hard to control churches spread and dotted across the country where my real concern is. I mean, because those ones, as we've seen, even when the law had been passed to control gathering, we've seen it in places like Kumasi, where a pastor consistently had to be arrested and eventually tried and prosecuted for breaking the law. That for me is the risk. It's like opening a Pandora's box if we are let this loose at the wrong time in the church.
Yeah, and you see, I actually agree with Evans. It's a problem. But I actually feel that you can, lift the restrictions and ask people to go to church. But I doubt if people are actually eager to go to church at this point, because people are being extremely careful. And yes, you would find some people who, they, I would say, a bit gullible, and they wouldn't mind, and they would just troop into the churches because they believe that they will get some healing. And so I would urge the religious leaders, the clergy, to, they should just relax and let's be convinced. Let's get to the point where we know that things are fine. And if things are fine and we found way around a lot of these challenges that we're having, then we can go back to gathering in the congregation. For now, let's stay in our homes and pray to God. I mean, the Lord is going to listen to us, and let's come together. Let's fellowship as families. And even that is actually good. You're having some, family bonding and family time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mama, we just quickly, there's another story on My Joy Online. I think it's interesting. UCC cautions lecturers against conducting exams, continuous assessment online. I think it's a very interesting story, because we all know schools are trying to grapple with what to do if you're going to write exams. The story says management of the University of Cape Coast has cautioned its lecturers against conducting any form of assessment tests, whether quizzes, assignments, or examinations online. It adds that according to the management, online academic work is restricted to lectures and tutorials. Therefore, any other form of activity aside from aforementioned will be non-scoring. I think that is very interesting. In other words, I mean, they are so asking that the exams be held in a classroom where you sit with other people. That is a very dangerous position. And I wonder what is wrong with having an exam online, by the way. I mean, I don't know what you guys think about it.
Well, I'm thinking institutions of higher learning need to be innovative. Even before coronavirus came or was detected in November in China, we all do know that there were a lot of online learning actions that were ongoing. People were in Ghana, going to school in Ukraine, in the UK, etc. They call it distance learning. You have, if it's a Welsh university, you still have the certificate as a Welsh university certificate. And I think that they have to be innovative and stay within the time and try to move along it, because after coronavirus, things are going to change. I don't know what Mamavi thinks. Things will definitely change.
Well, I mean, it sounds like they have an idea when this whole ban on gathering will be lifted. So it's almost like continue the usual teaching online, and then when the ban is lifted, you go back and sit in the classroom and write the exam. That's totally wrong, I think, because this whole extension does something to the calendar itself, the academic calendar, and you can't be pushing exam till when?
Israel, what's your view on this?
I feel that they also should hold on, or they should find innovative ways of going about it. I mean, I suspect the challenges, they haven't really set up their systems to hold or conduct these online examinations, and that's why they really don't want to go down that path. But the one story that I'm interested in that I like to bring up has to do with the King Takite Kochu. The second outdoor as
my
Are you related to him?
It's got to be real quick, though.
Okay, so first of all, there have been issues about social distancing and why this is happening. You know, we have the Ukapehene being installed, and that became an issue, and this is also happening. But beyond that, I'm hoping that we're not going to, this will be the end of the challenges we've been having and the disputes we've been having as with regards to who is actually the government chair.
Yeah.
So is this the government chair?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, so they claim. We'll see.
I'm thinking if there's going to be any dispute or fights among the parties, Charlie, Israel, you're a guy. You come from Osu, don't you? So, Charlie, straight away we
settle the score, and Evans too. Okay,
known in private life as Israelite.
Just before we run up, we want to tell our listeners that you guys going forward are a part of our show, so they'll be seeing more of you and hearing more of you. Your thoughts on issues dominating the headlines. So, thank you, guys.
It's been enjoyable. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, same here.
Mama V.
All right, stay with us. We've got sports coming your way. Still, the English Premier League, you know, what's the way forward? Still a lot of conversations around it. Is it Brighton, a player getting infected with the coronavirus just when the conversation about opening up and playing the game, you know, just got everybody excited. So stay with us. Benedict comes up next with details of this and plenty more in the world of sports.